A martial arts black belt breaks a teenager's arm during a community center demonstration, deliberately snapping the bone while families watch in horror. The brutal instructor towers over his screaming victim, dismissing the injury as a learning experience, while parents call for help. But the quiet janitor mopping floors in the corner isn't just another maintenance worker. This is Jackie Chan himself. The sadistic bully has no idea he just crippled a kid in front of a man who spent 50 years using martial arts to protect the innocent, not destroy them. While the teenager writhes in agony and his grandmother rushes to his side, the legendary fighter approaches with that familiar calm that's terrified villains across decades of films. The arrogant instructor thinks he's facing some washed-up actor, but he's about to learn why Jackie Chan became a global icon for never backing down from bullies. His black belt students start recording, expecting to film their master humiliating another challenger, but they're actually capturing the moment their reign of terror ends. What happens when you break a child's bones in front of Jackie Chan? Will the instructor survive discovering that some movie legends are absolutely real? What happened next would shatter the bully's confidence for the rest of his pathetic existence. Before we jump back and tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Riverside Community Center buzzed with the familiar energy of its annual youth fair, though Patricia Wells couldn't shake the feeling that something was different this October morning. Fewer families browsed the booths showcasing after-school programs and sports teams than in previous years. The economic struggles choking their working-class neighborhood had left their mark everywhere, from the faded paint on the gymnasium walls to the worried expressions of parents counting dollars before committing to activities for their children. Patricia adjusted her auburn ponytail and checked her clipboard again, forcing a smile as she greeted the Rodriguez family. 8 years of fighting for resources had taught her to mask her concerns, but the declining attendance numbers told a story she couldn't ignore. The community center that had been the neighborhood's beating heart for decades was slowly dying, and she felt powerless to stop it. The morning's quiet desperation shattered when Marcus Kellerman arrived. The man commanded attention without trying. 6 feet 2 inches of intimidation wrapped in an expensive black martial arts uniform that looked more military than traditional. His 3 black belt assistants followed in perfect formation, their matching outfits and intense expressions creating an immediate buzz among the scattered families. Parents gathered their children closer while teenagers craned their necks to get a better look at these newcomers who moved with predatory precision. Kellerman surveyed the gymnasium like a general assessing conquered territory. His dead blue eyes cataloged every detail while his assistants, Kevin Morrison, Janet Phillips, and Tony Vasquez, began setting up demonstration equipment with military efficiency. The instructor's bald head gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and the weapon tattoos covering his muscular arms seemed to writhe as he unpacked striking pads and focus mitts. Ladies and gentlemen, Kellerman's voice boomed across the gymnasium, instantly commanding attention from every corner of the building. I'm here to offer your children something this neighborhood has never seen: the opportunity to become unstoppable warriors through my ultimate combat system. Patricia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October weather. Something about this man's presence felt wrong, predatory in a way that made her administrative instincts scream warnings. But the growing crowd of interested parents and fascinated teenagers told a different story. Near the back wall, an elderly janitor continued mopping floors with quiet persistence, occasionally pausing to observe the demonstration with eyes that seemed far too knowing for a simple maintenance worker. Kellerman's pitch built momentum like a gathering storm. He promised transformation through what he called practical dominance training, techniques designed not just for self-defense, but for establishing superiority over anyone who dared challenge his students. His philosophy centered on crushing weakness and eliminating mercy, concepts that made Patricia's stomach twist even as she watched parents nod with growing interest. The world is full of predators, Kellerman declared, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Traditional martial arts teach you to respect your opponents. I teach you to destroy them before they can hurt you or your family. 17-year-old Danny Kowalski shifted uncomfortably beside his grandmother Rose, his calloused hands clenching as he listened to Kellerman's aggressive philosophy. The lean teenager had spent years learning that strength meant protecting others, not dominating them. His part-time construction job had taught him the difference between necessary toughness and pointless cruelty. When Kellerman opened the floor for questions, Danny's hand shot up before his grandmother could stop him. "Sir," Danny's voice carried clearly across the gymnasium. "Why should martial arts be about dominating people instead of improving yourself and protecting others who can't protect themselves?" The question hit the demonstration like a physical blow. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd as other parents recognized the wisdom in the teenager's words. Rose Kowalski gripped her grandson's arm, her teacher's instincts recognizing the dangerous shift in Kellerman's expression. The instructor's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and vicious underneath. His black belt assistants stepped closer, forming an intimidating triangle around their leader as he processed what he clearly perceived as a public challenge to his authority. "That's an interesting question, young man," Kellerman said, his voice dropping to a tone that made several parents unconsciously step backward. "It sounds like you think you understand martial arts better than someone who's spent 20 years perfecting the science of combat." The gymnasium fell silent except for the quiet whisper of a mop against linoleum as the elderly janitor continued his work, moving steadily closer to the demonstration area with movements that seemed casual but somehow purposeful. Danny felt every eye in the building focus on him, but his moral compass wouldn't let him back down from a philosophy that celebrated hurting others. The tension in the gymnasium became palpable as Danny stood at the edge of Kellerman's demonstration mat, his grandmother's urgent whispers barely audible over the blood rushing in his ears. Rose Kowalski's grip on his arm tightened with each passing second, her decades of teaching experience recognizing a dangerous adult who'd moved far beyond reasonable discussion. "Danny, please," she whispered, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd raised him since he was 10. "This isn't worth proving a point." But Patricia Wells had stepped forward, trying to inject diplomatic reason into a situation spiraling toward confrontation. "Perhaps we could discuss different approaches to martial arts philosophy instead of philosophy." Kellerman interrupted, his voice carrying mock surprise that fooled no one in the crowd. "Ms. Wells, your young friend here seems to think he understands combat better than a professional instructor. I believe he deserves a practical demonstration of why my methods work." The manipulation was masterful and obvious simultaneously. Kellerman played to the crowd's curiosity while appealing to Danny's teenage pride, creating a trap that seemed to offer only two choices: appear cowardly or accept a clearly dangerous challenge. Danny's friends from school, Amy Rodriguez and her track team teammates, called out encouragement, not understanding the stakes their friend was facing. The elderly janitor had moved close enough now that anyone paying attention might notice the fluid grace of his movements, the way his posture had gradually straightened from a maintenance worker's hunch to something altogether more focused and alert. But every eye in the building was fixed on the drama unfolding at center court that Kellerman's assistants quickly arranged safety mats in a perfect demonstration circle, their movements creating an illusion of official sanction and proper procedure. The instructor removed his jacket with deliberate ceremony, revealing muscular arms covered in tattoos, depicting various weapons and martial arts symbols that seemed designed more for intimidation than artistic expression. "This will just be a light technical demonstration," Kellerman announced to the crowd, his words carefully chosen to reassure concerned parents while his eyes promised something entirely different to Danny. Sometimes the best way to understand proper technique is through hands-on experience. Against every instinct screaming at him to walk away, against his grandmother's increasingly desperate protests, Danny stepped onto the mat. The circle of families formed naturally around them, parents unconsciously pulling children closer while teenagers pressed forward for a better view. Kellerman smiled with cold satisfaction as he assumed his fighting stance. And Danny realized he'd just made a terrible mistake. Danny tried to remember everything he'd learned from YouTube videos about basic defensive stances as Kellerman began circling him with predatory patience. The instructor started gently, demonstrating simple wrist control techniques while narrating each movement for the audience's benefit, his voice maintaining the professional tone of an experienced teacher. "Proper leverage eliminates the need for excessive force," Kellerman explained, applying a basic grip break that Danny countered successfully. When you understand anatomy and physics, size becomes irrelevant. For a brief moment, Danny felt hopeful. The demonstration seemed genuinely educational, and his natural athleticism allowed him to follow Kellerman's instructions without embarrassing himself. Several parents nodded approvingly as the teenager showed he could learn quickly and respond appropriately to instruction. But when Danny successfully countered one of Kellerman's grip techniques, something dark flickered in the instructor's eyes. The change was subtle at first, slightly more pressure in the joint locks, faster transitions between techniques, a gradual abandonment of the explanatory narrative that had made everything seem safe and controlled. Danny found himself struggling to keep up as Kellerman's demonstrations became increasingly aggressive, the pretense of gentle instruction evaporating like morning mist. "Sir," Danny gasped, trying to tap out using the basic martial arts etiquette he'd seen in movies. "I think I understand now." Kellerman ignored the submission signal completely. The standing armbar came with brutal efficiency, Kellerman's military precision combining with cold malice to create a technique designed not to teach, but to destroy. Danny's scream pierced the gymnasium as his forearm snapped with a sound like a breaking branch, the sickening crack echoing off the walls and into the horrified silence that followed. Rose Kowalski rushed onto the mat before her grandson hit the ground, her grandmother's instincts overriding any concern for her own safety. Patricia Wells shouted for someone to call 911 while parents gathered their crying children and tried to process what they'd just witnessed. Kellerman stood over his victim with cold satisfaction, adjusting his uniform as if nothing significant had happened. "He should have tapped out sooner," he announced to the traumatized crowd. "Real martial arts doesn't coddle weakness." Near the back wall, the elderly janitor set down his mop with careful deliberation and began walking toward the demonstration area, his shuffling maintenance worker's gait replaced by something altogether more purposeful and dangerous. The old man's transformation was subtle but unmistakable to anyone who cared to notice. His posture straightening, his movements becoming fluid and precise. His eyes assessing the situation with the focused intensity of a professional who'd seen too much violence to be shocked by one more example of human cruelty. Danny's agonized moans filled the gymnasium as Rose knelt beside him, her hands hovering over his obviously broken arm, while she whispered reassurances neither of them believed. The forearm bent at an unnatural angle, and every small movement sent fresh waves of pain through the teenager's body. Kellerman began packing his equipment with infuriating calm, dismissing the injury as a valuable learning experience when Patricia Wells demanded an explanation for what had just happened. His three assistants formed a protective barrier around their instructor, their black uniforms and cold expressions discouraging anyone from approaching too closely. "Accidents happen when people don't know their limitations," Kellerman said, his voice carrying just enough mock concern to avoid outright cruelty while making his contempt clear. Perhaps next time he'll think before challenging his betters. Several parents were already on their phones with emergency services and lawyers, their angry voices creating a buzz of righteous indignation that Kellerman seemed to find amusing rather than concerning. He'd clearly done this before, confident that legal liability and public outrage would fade while his reputation for decisive action would only grow stronger. The elderly janitor moved through the crowd with surprising grace, his previous shuffling gait replaced by fluid steps that carried him forward with unmistakable purpose. Parents stepped aside instinctively, though most remained focused on the drama surrounding Danny's injury rather than noticing the transformation occurring in their peripheral vision. His posture had straightened completely now, decades of slouched maintenance work peeling away to reveal something altogether more formidable underneath. The weathered hands that had been gripping a mop handle showed calluses that spoke of different kinds of work, harder training, and skills that had nothing to do with cleaning floors. That Kellerman's assistants noticed him first, Kevin Morrison's military training, recognizing something in the old man's approach that made him unconsciously shift into a more alert stance. But Kellerman himself remained obliviously focused on his equipment, supremely confident that no one in this working-class gymnasium posed any threat to his authority. When the janitor reached the edge of the demonstration area, he spoke quietly, his voice carrying an unmistakable authority that cut through the chaos like a blade. "Excuse me." Kellerman turned toward him with the casual contempt he reserved for service workers, having no idea what he was about to face. "Get back to your mopping, old man," Kellerman said without looking up from his equipment bag, his dismissive tone carrying the automatic arrogance of someone who'd never learned to see past uniforms and job titles. "This doesn't concern you." The crowd's attention shifted between Danny's injury and this unexpected interruption, most people too focused on the immediate crisis to pay attention to one more elderly worker. But Patricia Wells looked up from her phone call with emergency services, and something about the janitor's transformed posture made her breath catch in her throat. The old man removed his baseball cap with deliberate ceremony, running weathered fingers through silver-streaked hair as he stepped fully into the gymnasium's fluorescent lighting. His face, no longer hidden in shadow, showed features that millions of people around the world would recognize instantly. "My God," Rose whispered from beside her injured grandson, her voice barely audible but carrying absolute certainty. "It's really him." Recognition spread through the adult crowd like wildfire. First the parents who'd grown up watching his movies, then their teenagers who'd discovered his films on streaming services. Excited whispers built into a buzz of disbelief as people reached for their phones, desperate to document what was happening in their small community gymnasium. Jackie Chan stood revealed, his familiar face now set in an expression of cold determination that had nothing to do with his usual screen persona. The warm humor and self-deprecating charm that had made him beloved worldwide was nowhere to be seen, replaced by something harder and infinitely more dangerous. "My name is Jackie Chan," he said, his accented English carrying the weight of 50 years spent learning that martial arts existed to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. "I've dedicated my life to understanding that true martial arts is about building others up, not tearing them down. You have just demonstrated the exact opposite." Kellerman finally looked up, his initial shock quickly transforming into sneering dismissal. The instructor's ego couldn't process the possibility that a 71-year-old actor might pose any real threat to someone who'd spent decades perfecting what he considered genuine combat techniques. "Just another washed-up movie star playing pretend," Kellerman laughed, his assistants joining in with nervous chuckles that didn't quite mask their growing uncertainty. Jackie stepped onto the mat, positioning himself between Kellerman and the still writhing Danny, his movements carrying the fluid precision of someone who'd never stopped training. The challenge hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. Jackie assumed his fighting stance with deceptive casualness, his hands held loosely at his sides while his feet found perfect balance on the gymnasium's polished floor. Kellerman, emboldened by his size advantage and convinced he was facing an over-the-hill entertainer, prepared to end this confrontation with the same brutal efficiency he'd used on Danny. The crowd formed a wide circle, parents pulling children back while everyone strained to see what would happen when movie magic met claimed real-world violence. Phones appeared everywhere, capturing what people assumed would be either Jackie's humiliation or an impressive, but ultimately choreographed demonstration. Kellerman launched himself forward with a straight punch designed to shatter bone and end careers, putting his full 220 pounds behind a blow that had hospitalized opponents in underground fighting circuits. The technique was textbook perfect, proper form, devastating power, and enough speed to overwhelm most defensive reactions that Jackie's response was poetry written in motion. Instead of blocking or dodging, he redirected Kellerman's energy with the effortless grace that had made his fight scenes legendary. The larger man found himself airborne, his own momentum carrying him helplessly into a stack of metal folding chairs that crashed down around him like metallic thunder. "Your stance is too wide," Jackie observed calmly as Kellerman scrambled to his feet, his professional assessment delivered without mockery or malice. "Anger makes you sloppy." What followed was a masterclass in defensive martial arts that proved why Jackie's movie fights had looked so realistic, because they were based on genuine skill refined over decades of serious training. Each of Kellerman's increasingly desperate attacks was met with precise counters that left the instructor off balance, confused, and growing more frustrated by the second. Jackie used the gymnasium's environment with creative flair that would have made his stunt coordinators proud. A climbing rope became a swing to avoid a vicious kick, sending him gracefully over Kellerman's head. A basketball grabbed without breaking stride, became a projectile that disrupted the instructor's balance at exactly the right moment. Throughout the brief but decisive confrontation, Jackie maintained his characteristic calm, even offering gentle corrections to his opponent's technique between defensive movements. His decades of experience showed in every controlled response, every perfectly timed counter, every moment where he chose restraint over retaliation. The fight ended with Kellerman flat on his back, Jackie's foot resting lightly, but unmistakably, on his chest in a position of complete control. The instructor's face showed something he'd probably never experienced before: the dawning realization that his philosophy of dominance had just been thoroughly and publicly dismantled. Martial arts, Jackie announced to the mesmerized crowd, is about protecting people, not hurting children. As paramedics rushed into the gymnasium and immediately began treating Danny's broken arm, Jackie quietly helped Rose gather her grandson's scattered belongings while Patricia Wells approached with the starstruck expression of someone still processing what had just happened at her community facility. "I can't believe you're really here," Patricia whispered, her administrative responsibilities warring with childhood memories of watching Jackie's films with her own family. "What you just did, thank you doesn't seem like enough." Jackie waved away her gratitude with characteristic humility, his attention focused on Rose's worried face as she followed the stretcher carrying her injured grandson toward the ambulance. But his questions about the community center revealed an intelligence that went far beyond his action hero persona. "This wasn't the first incident like this, was it?" he asked, his tone gentle but probing as Kellerman's humiliated assistants helped their defeated instructor retreat from the gymnasium. Patricia's expression grew troubled as she began sharing information she'd been reluctant to discuss publicly. Kellerman's demonstrations weren't isolated events. Similar accidents had occurred at 3 other local community centers over the past month. Each incident followed the same pattern: aggressive instructors offering modernized training, children getting seriously injured during demonstrations, and mounting insurance claims that threatened the facility's survival. Rose, despite her concern for Danny, provided crucial context about pressure the community center had been facing from developers wanting to purchase the property. Several board members had suddenly become enthusiastic about updating their programming, coinciding exactly with Kellerman's arrival in the neighborhood. "The timing's too convenient," Rose said, her 45 years of teaching experience making her naturally suspicious of coincidences. "When institutions start failing just as developers show interest, there's usually a connection." Jackie listened with the focused attention of someone who'd learned to recognize patterns during decades of fighting various forms of corruption. The systematic targeting of working-class community centers, the consistent injuries during demonstrations, the financial pressure that followed each incident. It painted a picture of coordinated intimidation rather than isolated poor judgment. Patricia reluctantly revealed the center's mounting crisis: declining enrollment, skyrocketing insurance premiums, and board members increasingly receptive to selling the property that had served the neighborhood for decades. Traditional programs were being canceled to make room for more contemporary alternatives like Kellerman's system. "How long before you're forced to close?" Jackie asked. 6 months, maybe less," Patricia admitted, her voice heavy with the weight of failing something bigger than herself. The ambulance pulled away with Danny and Rose. Jackie made a decision that would change everything. "Would you mind if I stuck around to help with cleanup? I'm between projects right now." Patricia agreed immediately, not realizing she'd just enlisted Jackie Chan in what was about to become a much larger fight for the community center's survival. Monday morning found Jackie genuinely mopping floors at the Riverside Community Center, his janitor's uniform authentic enough to fool casual observers. Patricia had readily agreed to let him work while figuring out his next career move. Though she suspected his motivations ran deeper than simple employment, Jackie's maintenance duties provided perfect cover for investigation. Using his building access, he explored every corner of the facility with the methodical thoroughness of someone trained to notice details others missed. The financial records in Patricia's unlocked filing cabinet told a disturbing story of systematic decline: insurance premiums that had tripled in 6 months, enrollment dropping as traditional programs were mysteriously canceled, and board meeting minutes revealing unexplained pressure to modernize their offerings. The breakthrough came in Patricia's desk drawer, a folder marked Hartwell Development Corporation containing preliminary architectural plans for a luxury shopping complex. The proposed location matched the community center's address exactly, complete with detailed demolition schedules and profit projections that treated the neighborhood's displacement as acceptable collateral damage. Jackie photographed everything with his phone, his decades of experience with corruption making him recognize the classic pattern. Hartwell wasn't just interested in one property. They were executing a neighborhood-wide acquisition strategy that required eliminating community anchors before driving down property values through orchestrated problems. Cross-referencing newspaper archives on Patricia's computer revealed Kellerman's ultimate combat system had been systematically targeting working-class community centers across the city. Every location showed identical patterns: aggressive demonstrations, injured children, insurance claims, and eventual closures that coincidentally preceded Hartwell development projects. The evidence was overwhelming but circumstantial. Jackie needed more than suspicious timing to prove conspiracy, especially against a corporation with enough resources to hire legitimate lawyers and public relations firms. His investigation was interrupted by Patricia's arrival with coffee and the community center's photo albums, decades of smiling children participating in programs that had shaped multiple generations of neighborhood families. "This place has been the heart of everything good about this community for 40 years, she said sadly, flipping through pictures of basketball teams, art classes, and graduation ceremonies. "I just don't know how much longer we can fight to keep it." Jackie's resolve hardened as he saw exactly what was at stake. This wasn't just about one building. It was about destroying the foundation that held an entire community together. Monday morning found Jackie genuinely mopping floors at the Riverside Community Center, his janitor's uniform authentic enough to fool casual observers. Patricia had readily agreed to let him work while figuring out his next career move. Though she suspected his motivations ran deeper than simple employment, Jackie's maintenance duties provided perfect cover for investigation. Using his building access, he explored every corner of the facility with the methodical thoroughness of someone trained to notice details others missed. The financial records in Patricia's unlocked filing cabinet told a disturbing story of systematic decline, insurance premiums that had tripled in 6 months, enrollment dropping as traditional programs were mysteriously canceled, and board meeting minutes revealing unexplained pressure to modernize their offerings. The breakthrough came in Patricia's desk drawer, a folder marked Hartwell Development Corporation containing preliminary architectural plans for a luxury shopping complex. The proposed location matched the community center's address exactly, complete with detailed demolition schedules and profit projections that treated the neighborhood's displacement as acceptable collateral damage. Jackie photographed everything with his phone, his decades of experience with corruption making him recognize the classic pattern. Hartwell wasn't just interested in one property. They were executing a neighborhood-wide acquisition strategy that required eliminating community anchors before driving down property values through orchestrated problems. Cross-referencing newspaper archives on Patricia's computer revealed Kellerman's ultimate combat system had been systematically targeting working-class community centers across the city. Every location showed identical patterns: aggressive demonstrations, injured children, insurance claims, and eventual closures that coincidentally preceded Hartwell development projects. The evidence was overwhelming but circumstantial. Jackie needed more than suspicious timing to prove conspiracy, especially against a corporation with enough resources to hire legitimate lawyers and public relations firms. His investigation was interrupted by Patricia's arrival with coffee and the community center's photo albums, decades of smiling children participating in programs that had shaped multiple generations of neighborhood families. "This place has been the heart of everything good about this community for 40 years, she said sadly, flipping through pictures of basketball teams, art classes, and graduation ceremonies. "I just don't know how much longer we can fight to keep it." Jackie's resolve hardened as he saw exactly what was at stake. This wasn't just about one building. It was about destroying the foundation that held an entire community together. Tuesday afternoon brought Jackie to the Kowalski family's modest apartment 6 blocks from the community center, where Rose greeted him at the door with coffee and the protective warmth of someone who'd recognized a genuine ally. Danny sat at their kitchen table with his cast-covered arm resting on a pillow, struggling to complete homework assignments with his non-dominant hand. "It's frustrating," Danny admitted, gesturing at his awkward handwriting. "But I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't been there. How many other kids has he hurt?" Rose settled into her chair with the deliberate movements of someone whose arthritis reminded her daily that age came with limitations. But her sharp green eyes missed nothing as she began sharing 40 years of neighborhood history. The community center had been where her late husband coached basketball, where Danny learned to read in after-school programs, where 3 generations of families had found support during the inevitable hardships of working-class life. When the steel mill closed in '98, that center kept half these families from falling apart completely. She explained, her teacher's instinct for context making every detail relevant. Free meals for kids whose parents were job hunting, homework, help when families couldn't afford tutors, basketball leagues that kept teenagers off street corners. Jackie listened with the focused attention of someone who understood that community institutions were more than buildings. They were the invisible infrastructure that held neighborhoods together during crisis. Rose's stories painted a picture of intergenerational support systems that had evolved organically over decades, relationships that would be impossible to recreate once destroyed. The alliance formed naturally as Rose revealed her background research into the community center's recent troubles. Her teaching experience had taught her to document everything, and she'd been tracking the board members who'd suddenly changed their positions after receiving consulting fees from unnamed sources. "I've got names, dates, and payment amounts," she said, producing a manila folder thick with copied documents. "What I don't have is proof these payments came from Hartwell or connected companies." Danny's determination surprised both adults as he insisted on helping despite his injury. His passion for justice reminded Jackie why this fight mattered, not just for one neighborhood, but for the principle that communities deserve protection from corporate predators who saw human displacement as acceptable business strategy. "These people hurt kids and think they can intimidate everyone into giving up," Rose said as Jackie prepared to leave. "You showing up here isn't coincidence. It's a blessing." Wednesday evening found Jackie arriving at the community center after hours to discover 6 teenagers waiting in the gymnasium, led by Amy Rodriguez with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to organizing her peers. Danny's injury had galvanized his friends into action, though their 16 and 17-year-old understanding of the situation focused more on justice than strategy. "We want to learn how to defend ourselves and protect this place," Amy announced, speaking for the group with natural leadership that reminded Jackie why teenagers often saw solutions adults missed. What happened to Danny can't happen to anyone else. The impromptu training session began with fundamental philosophy rather than physical techniques. Jackie emphasized that fighting was always the last resort, but when it became necessary, it should be decisive and protective rather than aggressive or vengeful. Each student brought different strengths. Amy's natural athleticism from track and field, Mike Chin's strategic thinking from chess club, Carlos Mendez's loyalty to his injured best friend. "Martial arts isn't about being tough enough to hurt people," Jackie explained, demonstrating basic defensive stances. "It's about being skilled enough to protect people without becoming the kind of person you're fighting against." The lessons evolved beyond physical training as Jackie shared stories from his career that emphasized the real martial artists who'd taught him. His humility about his own abilities and genuine respect for traditional teachers created deep connections with students hungry for adult guidance that treated them as capable rather than helpless. Lisa Thompson, quiet and observant, asked the question that revealed their real concern. "What happens when adults won't listen to us because we're just kids? How do we protect our community when nobody takes us seriously?" Jackie's answer came from decades of learning that heroism wasn't about individual strength. It was about inspiring others to find their own courage. You start by proving you understand the responsibility that comes with ability. When people see you're serious about protecting others, they stop thinking about your age. The evening ended with Amy speaking for the group. "Mr. Chan, adults always tell us we're too young to make a difference. You're the first grown-up who's teaching us how to actually help." Jackie realized he wasn't just training these teenagers. He was creating the next generation of community leaders who would continue protecting their neighborhood long after his involvement ended. The real victory wouldn't come from defeating Kellerman, but from building something stronger in his pulse. Thursday night's maintenance routine became a crime scene investigation when Jackie arrived to find the community center's front door hanging open, emergency lighting casting eerie shadows through the familiar space that now felt violent and wrong. His decades of experience with violence had taught him to recognize the aftermath of deliberate intimidation. The gymnasium had been systematically destroyed with surgical precision, equipment smashed beyond repair, inspirational posters torn down, mirrors cracked in patterns that suggested organized vandalism rather than random destruction. Spray painted across the main wall in dripping red letters. Traditional martial arts are dead. Adapt or leave. Patricia's office told an even more disturbing story. Files scattered across the floor, computer missing, family photographs torn in half with methodical cruelty that transformed property damage into personal violation. The threatening note left on her desk made the escalation clear. Next time it won't just be property. Jackie documented everything with his phone's camera, noting details that proved the intruders had known exactly what they were looking for. They'd targeted specific files about the center's history and financial records while ignoring expensive but irrelevant equipment. This wasn't random vandalism. It was strategic psychological warfare designed to break spirits rather than just steal property. Alone in the destroyed space, Jackie felt familiar anger at bullies who thought destruction would make people surrender, rather than fight harder. His resolve hardened as he began cleaning up, not because it was his job, but because giving in to intimidation meant letting evil win through fear rather than strength. The night's work revealed one crucial oversight. By the intruders, Rose Kowalski's document cache hidden behind a loose brick in the basement. Her teacher's paranoia about keeping backup records had preserved the most damaging evidence of the conspiracy, including financial documents that proved connections between Hartwell Development and Kellerman's operation. Dawn was breaking when Patricia arrived to find Jackie had spent the entire night restoring basic order to the vandalized facility. Her initial gratitude transformed into horror as she fully comprehended the scope of destruction and read the threatening note that made this personal rather than just professional. The message was clear. Kellerman's people were escalating beyond martial arts demonstrations into criminal intimidation. But they'd also provided additional evidence of conspiracy that Jackie intended to use against them. The real war for the community center's survival was just beginning. Friday morning brought police investigators and insurance adjusters to document the vandalism, their clinical assessment of damage turning Patricia's beloved community center into a crime scene filled with evidence tags and measurement tools. Jackie continued his janitor duties while listening to official conversations that treated the destruction as simple property crime rather than organized intimidation. But Patricia's phone calls with the insurance company revealed the true scope of their predicament. Premiums would increase again after this incident, assuming coverage wasn't canceled entirely. Several board members were already suggesting that perhaps selling to Hartwell Development represented their only viable option for avoiding financial catastrophe. Rose arrived with coffee and breakfast, her teacher's determination to solve problems. Through research proving invaluable as they spread documents across Patricia's restored desk. The breakthrough came when Rose cross-referenced the Hartwell Development folder with recent property sales throughout the neighborhood, revealing a pattern that transformed suspicious coincidences into obvious conspiracy. "Look at this," Rose said, pointing to a city planning map marked with red X's. Every community center, small business, and family property that's had problems in the last year, they're all on Hartwell's acquisition list. The revelation was staggering in its scope. Hartwell Development Corporation wasn't just interested in the Riverside Community Center. They were executing a neighborhood-wide gentrification plan that required eliminating community anchors before driving down property values through orchestrated problems. Kellerman's martial arts operation was just one tool in a larger strategy of destabilization. Jackie studied financial documents showing payments from shell companies connected to Hartwell, flowing to various security consultants and martial arts instructors across the city. The paper trail was complex but traceable, revealing a corporate machine with significant resources and no moral boundaries when it came to displacing working-class families. Patricia's despair transformed into righteous anger as she realized her life's work had been deliberately sabotaged by people who saw community destruction as acceptable business strategy. Her decision to fight back, despite personal risk, showed the courage that had made her a natural community leader. Their planning session was interrupted by Patricia's office phone ringing with mechanical persistence. Kellerman's voice carried through the speaker with calm menace. "Ms. Wells, I'm calling to formally challenge your janitor to a martial arts tournament next weekend. Winner takes control of all youth programming decisions at Riverside Community Center." The gauntlet had been thrown down publicly, but Jackie recognized it as another distraction from Hartwell's real goals. Saturday morning's local newspaper sports section featured a brief article treating Kellerman's challenge as entertainment rather than recognizing the serious implications for community safety. Movie star versus local martial arts instructor read like a publicity stunt designed to sell tickets rather than a confrontation that would determine the future of neighborhood youth programs. Jackie met with Rose and Patricia at the community center to discuss their impossible position. Accepting the challenge legitimized Kellerman's authority and risked Jackie's defeat, ending their resistance. But refusing it allowed Kellerman to claim victory by default and continue his intimidation campaign with increased credibility. Word had spread through the neighborhood's informal networks, bringing concerned residents to the community center throughout the morning. Parents expressed fears about their children's safety, business owners worried about property values declining further, and teenagers from Amy's group volunteered to help however they could with organizing and logistics. The tournament is designed as a distraction, Jackie realized, studying Hartwell's development timeline. While everyone focuses on the martial arts spectacle, corporate lawyers will be finalizing contracts and pressuring board members. We need to use their own strategy against them. Rose's experience with community organizing proved invaluable as she began coordinating neighborhood response and media attention. Her understanding of local politics and bureaucratic procedures would be crucial for any strategy that went beyond simple physical confrontation with Kellerman. Patricia demonstrated her administrative skills by managing the growing crowd of supporters while simultaneously researching legal options for blocking Hartwell's purchase. Her professional network included lawyers and city council members who might provide crucial assistance if properly motivated. The afternoon brought Kevin Morrison to the community center, Kellerman's former assistant, looking nervous and conflicted as he requested private conversation with Jackie. His military background had made him increasingly uncomfortable with his instructor's methods, and Danny's broken arm had finally pushed him beyond his capacity for rationalization. "I can't be part of this anymore," Morrison admitted, his conscience finally overruling his misplaced loyalty. "What Kellerman did to that kid, it's not martial arts. It's just cruelty disguised as training." Danny arrived with his cast-covered arm still limiting his movement, but his spirit completely intact. "I can't fight," he told Jackie with quiet determination, "but I can help organize other people. We all can." The community was beginning to understand that their real strength lay not in any individual hero, but in their collective commitment to protecting what they'd built together. Sunday morning's training session with Amy's teenage group was interrupted by Morrison's unexpected arrival, his nervous demeanor and obvious internal conflict immediately setting everyone on edge. The former military police officer had clearly struggled with his decision to approach Jackie directly, knowing it meant betraying his instructor's confidence. "Kellerman's been studying footage of your movies," Morrison revealed, his information delivered with the precision of someone trained to brief superiors. "He's looking for patterns in your fighting style, weaknesses he can exploit during the tournament." But that's not the worst part. The intelligence Morrison provided painted a disturbing picture of Kellerman's preparation. Performance-enhancing drugs had become part of his training regimen, combined with sessions with former underground fighters who specialized in techniques designed to cause permanent injury while remaining technically legal in tournament settings. "He's not planning to just beat you," Morrison warned, his military experience making him understand tactical objectives better than martial arts philosophy. "He wants to hurt you badly enough that you'll never interfere with his operations again. The tournament is supposed to end with you in the hospital." Rose and Patricia remained suspicious of Morrison's motives. wondering if this represented another layer of Kellerman's psychological warfare designed to intimidate Jackie before their confrontation. But the financial records Morrison provided, showing direct payments from Hartwell to Kellerman's operation, offered concrete evidence they'd been seeking. Jackie adapted his training based on Morrison's intelligence, preparing to counter strategies specifically designed to exploit his age and perceived vulnerabilities. More importantly, he intensified the teenagers' education about recognizing and resisting intimidation tactics, preparing them for whatever escalation might follow the tournament. Community support continued growing as word spread about both the tournament and the larger issues at stake. Local business owners who'd experienced similar pressure from development companies began sharing their own stories, while former community center students returned to support the institution that had shaped their childhoods. Amy emerged as a natural leader among the teenagers, her track and field experience translating into strategic thinking about coordination and timing. "If they're trying to distract us with the tournament," she asked, "what should we be doing instead?" The question revealed the teenagers' growing understanding that their real battle wasn't about martial arts. It was about community organizing and collective action against forces much larger than any individual opponent. Morrison's final warning carried the weight of someone who'd seen Kellerman's true nature. "He's not just planning to beat you. He wants to destroy everything you represent," in front of everyone who's starting to believe they can fight back. Monday evening brought Jackie to what should have been a final training session before Saturday's tournament. But instead, he found Patricia surrounded by legal documents in her office, her defeated expression telling the story before she spoke a word. The community center's board of directors had held an emergency meeting, voting to accept Hartwell Development's buyout offer effective immediately. "The sale closes in 30 days regardless of tournament outcome," Patricia explained, her voice hollow with the weight of institutional failure. Board members cited mounting insurance costs, repair expenses from the vandalism, and fear of further violence as reasons for the decision. The revelation hit Jackie like a physical blow as he realized the tournament had always been an elaborate distraction. While everyone focused on martial arts spectacle, Hartwell's lawyers had been systematically pressuring board members with financial incentives disguised as consulting fees and veiled threats about personal property foreclosures. Several board members had received job offers from companies mysteriously connected to Hartwell Corporation, while others faced convenient banking problems that threatened their homes and businesses. The corporate pressure campaign had been comprehensive and perfectly legal, attacking community defenders through bureaucratic channels while public attention focused elsewhere. News spread quickly through the neighborhood, creating waves of despair and anger among families who depended on the community center's programs. Some residents blamed Jackie for escalating the conflict, arguing that accepting Kellerman's presence would have been preferable to losing the institution entirely. The weight of unintended consequences pressed down on Jackie as he faced the possibility that his intervention had accelerated rather than prevented the community center's destruction. Rose found him sitting alone in the gymnasium, surrounded by boxes of programs being packed for storage, questioning whether his involvement had helped or harmed the people he'd tried to protect. 40 years I've been fighting for this place," Rose said, settling beside him with the careful movements of someone whose bones ached but whose spirit remained unbroken. "This isn't the first time powerful people try to take it away from us." Her faith in community resilience began restoring Jackie's confidence as she shared stories about previous battles, urban renewal projects, funding cuts, natural disasters, and how they'd survived by working together rather than depending on individual heroes. Late-night research revealed one crucial detail buried in Hartwell's purchase contract. The sale was contingent on community approval through a public hearing process. The corporation had assumed no one would organize effective opposition, but they'd underestimated the neighborhood's capacity for collective action. The fight wasn't over. It had just moved to a different battlefield that required different weapons. Then martial arts skills. Tuesday morning found Jackie walking through the community center's gymnasium, now transformed into a packing facility where decades of programming materials disappeared into cardboard boxes. Children's artwork came down from walls like falling leaves, sports equipment was sorted for donation or sale, and the weight of impending closure hung heavy in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Community morale had reached its lowest point. Since Kellerman's arrival, several families had already enrolled their children in other programs, convinced that resistance was futile against corporate power backed by legal documents and unlimited resources. Even longtime supporters expressed frustration with Jackie, arguing that his confrontation with Kellerman had accelerated problems that might have been managed through compromise. Amy's teenage group showed signs of fracturing under pressure, with some members losing faith in their ability to influence adult decisions that seemed predetermined by forces beyond their understanding. The optimism that had characterized their early training sessions gave way to bitter discussions about powerlessness and the futility of fighting institutional authority. Jackie faced his own crisis of confidence as he sat alone among memories of what the center had meant to generations of neighborhood families. Rose found him studying old photographs, basketball teams celebrating championships, art classes displaying proud creations, graduation ceremonies marking academic achievements that might never have happened without community support. "I've seen this look before," Rose said, her teacher's experience recognizing the particular despair that came from questioning whether good intentions had produced harmful results. "You're wondering if your involvement made things worse for people who were just trying to survive." Their conversation revealed Jackie's vulnerability beneath his heroic image. Decades of fighting corruption had taught him that intervention sometimes accelerated destruction rather than preventing it, especially when corporate adversaries had resources and patience that individual heroes couldn't match. Rose shared stories about other times the community had faced impossible odds, not just external threats, but internal divisions that made collective action seem hopeless. Her faith in neighborhood resilience came from witnessing ordinary people find extraordinary strength when they stopped waiting for salvation and started working together. "The board vote isn't the end," she insisted with the determination of someone who'd fought too many battles to surrender now. "It's just the beginning of a different kind of fight that requires different weapons than martial arts." Danny's arrival with his healing arm marked a turning point in their discussion about strategy and hope. Wednesday morning brought Rose and Patricia to the public library's reference section, where they worked through dense municipal law texts. With the determination of people who refuse to accept institutional defeat without exploring every possible alternative. Jackie provided security and coffee while they navigated bureaucratic requirements that most citizens never knew existed. Their breakthrough came in regulations dating back to the community center's original construction with public funding in the 1960s. Properties designated as community assets required approval from neighborhood residents before any sale could be finalized, but the hearing process had to be initiated within 72 hours of the purchase announcement. Hartwell's lawyers assumed nobody would know about this requirement. Patricia realized, her administrative background helping her understand the deliberate complexity of municipal procedures designed to discourage citizen participation. They've been using this same strategy in other neighborhoods, counting on ignorance and intimidation to prevent opposition. Jackie's investigation revealed that similar community asset protections existed throughout the city, but local officials had been influenced or intimidated to avoid mentioning these legal safeguards to affected neighborhoods. The pattern suggested systematic corruption that went beyond individual corporate greed into government complicity with displacement strategies. Rose's teaching experience proved invaluable as she researched Hartwell Development Corporation's history, uncovering patterns of environmental violations, worker safety issues, and community displacement that provided ammunition for the upcoming hearing. Her documentation skills ensured every piece of evidence was properly organized and legally admissible. The research process revealed both the scope of their challenge and the strength of their position. Hartwell had resources and political connections, but they'd also created a documented trail of harmful practices that could be used against them in public forums where community voices carried legal weight. Patricia's discovery of the hearing requirement reinvigorated neighborhood opposition as word spread that legal options still existed. However, they also learned that Kellerman had been visiting local businesses and residences, using intimidation tactics to discourage attendance at any public proceedings. 72 hours, Jackie repeated, studying the legal timeline. "That means we file tomorrow or lose the opportunity entirely." Rose nodded grimly. and the hearing has to be scheduled within 2 weeks of filing. Kellerman's tournament is this Saturday. If we can get the hearing scheduled for the same day, we force them to fight on two fronts simultaneously. The legal battle would require different skills than martial arts, but the stakes remained identical, protecting community institutions from corporate predators who saw human displacement as acceptable business strategy. Thursday evening's community organizing meeting filled Rose's living room beyond capacity, forcing late arrivals to stand in the kitchen and hallway while Jackie, Patricia, and the core planning group coordinated strategy for the public hearing scheduled for Saturday morning, deliberately timed to coincide with Kellerman's martial arts tournament. The group divided responsibilities with military precision born from desperation and determination. Rose would coordinate community speakers and witness testimony, drawing on her decades of teaching experience to help nervous residents prepare effective presentations. Patricia handled logistics and media outreach, using her administrative network to ensure maximum attendance and documentation. Amy's teenage group took responsibility for neighborhood canvassing, their energy and moral authority proving crucial for reaching families who'd grown suspicious of adult promises. Their door-to-door efforts revealed strong opposition to Hartwell's development project, but also significant fear of retaliation from Kellerman's organization. People want to fight back, Carlos reported after canvassing his apartment complex. But they're scared about what happens to their families if they speak up publicly. 3 families got threatening phone calls just for talking to us. Danny emerged as a natural community leader despite his youth, his experience as Kellerman's victim giving him moral authority that transcended age barriers. His willingness to testify publicly about his injury inspired other victims to share their own stories of intimidation and violence. Jackie realized that Kellerman's systematic intimidation campaign was actually providing evidence of criminal conspiracy that could be used in the hearing. Each threat, each visit, each attempt to silence community voices created a documented pattern of organized harassment designed to support corporate objectives. Morrison arrived at the meeting with additional warnings about Kellerman's plans to disrupt the public hearing through violence if legal challenges proved effective. His intelligence about coordinated intimidation tactics helped the group prepare security measures and emergency procedures. They're not just fighting for one property, Morrison explained, his military experience making him understand strategic objectives. Hartwell's been using this same model in neighborhoods across the city. If you win here, it threatens their entire operation. The meeting ended with Jackie walking through the neighborhood, noting Kellerman's people positioned at key locations in obvious surveillance patterns. The final confrontation was approaching, but it would be fought on multiple battlefields simultaneously. Rose's final words captured their collective determination. Tomorrow we prove that communities can't be destroyed by corporate bullying and violence, whatever it takes. Saturday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth that drew large crowds to the high school auditorium for the public hearing that would determine the community center's fate. Jackie noted Kellerman and his assistants positioned throughout the audience, their black uniforms and intimidating presence clearly designed to discourage community participation through psychological pressure. The hearing began with Hartwell Development's lawyers presenting their purchase proposal with corporate polish that emphasized economic benefits while minimizing community concerns. Their presentation included professionally produced charts showing increased tax revenue, job creation projections, and architectural renderings that made their luxury shopping complex appear beneficial rather than destructive. Hartwell's case seemed compelling until Rose stepped to the microphone with 45 years of teaching experience and a manila folder thick with documented evidence. Her presentation systematically dismantled corporate promises by referencing similar projects in other neighborhoods where jobs had failed to materialize and tax benefits had been redirected to offshore accounts. "They're not developers," Rose declared, her voice carrying across the packed auditorium. "They're corporate raiders who destroy communities for profit, then move on to the next neighborhood when the damage is complete." Danny's testimony electrified the audience as he described Kellerman's violence and the broader intimidation campaign designed to silence opposition. His courage in speaking publicly despite ongoing threats inspired other victims to come forward, creating a cascade of testimony that revealed patterns of systematic harassment. Patricia presented financial evidence showing direct payments from Hartwell to Kellerman's operation, transforming what appeared to be random martial arts instruction into documented conspiracy to destabilize community institutions. The paper trail was complex but damning, revealing corporate methodology that treated human displacement as acceptable business strategy. As community opposition became overwhelmingly clear, Kellerman's people began creating disturbances, heckling speakers, making threatening gestures, and attempting to intimidate witnesses through physical proximity and aggressive posturing. The hearing moderator struggled to maintain order while Jackie positioned himself to protect vulnerable community members. The situation exploded when Kellerman himself stood up during Patricia's evidence presentation, loudly challenging the entire proceeding as irrelevant since he still had a tournament scheduled with Jackie. His disruption was designed to shift focus from legal evidence to physical confrontation, playing to his strengths while undermining democratic processes. Local news cameras captured both community testimony and Kellerman's disruptive behavior, creating public documentation of corporate intimidation tactics that would prove crucial for broader legal action against Hartwell's operations throughout the city. The hearing moderator called for recess to restore order, but Kellerman announced that his tournament would proceed immediately in the school's gymnasium, with or without official sanction. The crowd streamed from the auditorium to the gymnasium, where Kellerman and his 3 assistants waited in a makeshift fighting arena surrounded by news cameras that transformed a private martial arts demonstration into televised spectacle. Jackie entered to discover Kellerman had changed the rules. Instead of one-on-one competition, he'd created a gauntlet challenge requiring Jackie to face all 4 instructors without rest. Jackie began with Tony Vasquez, the most technical fighter, using defensive redirection to send him crashing into crash mats. The victory came at a cost, several hard hits that began wearing down Jackie's stamina while demonstrating this wasn't sanctioned tournament competition but organized violence. Janet Phillips attacked with Eskrima sticks, her weapons training, creating deadly combinations that forced Jackie to use the gymnasium's climbing ropes and basketball hoops for 3-dimensional combat. He defeated her by using volleyball nets to entangle her weapons, but the fight revealed how far beyond legitimate martial arts Kellerman had moved. Brad Hutchins brought street fighting brutality that ignored all tournament conventions, introducing chairs and maintenance tools as improvised weapons. Jackie's defense became increasingly desperate as he used gymnastics equipment and even a janitor's cart to counter attacks designed to cause permanent injury rather than demonstrate skill. Throughout the gauntlet, community members cheered for Jackie while noting the stark difference between his protective philosophy and his opponent's aggressive domination. Where they used violence to intimidate and control, he used skill to defend and protect, even preventing further injury to defeated opponents. The gymnasium filled with tension as Jackie stood exhausted but victorious over 3 fallen instructors. Kellerman finally stepped onto the mat, fresh while Jackie was worn down, bigger and stronger, enhanced by performance drugs that violated every principle of fair competition. The real fight, not just for victory, but for everything Jackie represented, about using strength to protect rather than dominate, was about to begin against an opponent who embodied everything wrong with corrupting martial arts for personal gain. Jackie faced Kellerman in the gymnasium's center, surrounded by community members, news cameras, and the defeated forms of 3 assistants. Despite exhaustion from previous fights, Jackie maintained his defensive stance while Kellerman circled with predatory confidence, drug-enhanced aggression, making him appear larger and more dangerous than ever. The fight began with Kellerman using size, strength, and chemical enhancement to overwhelm Jackie's defenses through brutal combinations of wrestling, striking, and dirty fighting techniques that had no place in legitimate martial arts. For the first time, Jackie appeared to be losing as community members watched their champion being systematically beaten. Kellerman prepared for a finishing move designed to cause serious injury when Danny's voice cut through the crowd. "Remember what you taught us. Protect others." Jackie's eyes focused on the children watching their hero potentially being destroyed, and his purpose crystallized with renewed clarity. Drawing on determination rather than just physical skill, Jackie began fighting not merely for victory, but to demonstrate real martial arts to the watching community. His techniques became more fluid and creative, using Kellerman's drug-enhanced aggression against him through precise redirections that turned raw power into uncontrolled momentum. The fight moved throughout the gymnasium as Jackie used every environmental element. Climbing wall holds became handholds for aerial attacks. Basketball backboards became launching platforms. Even the sound system became part of his strategy. Each improvised technique demonstrated why his movie fight scenes had looked so believable that Kellerman's frustration with his inability to pin down Jackie led him to begin destroying gym equipment in rage, endangering spectators and revealing his true character. Jackie's final combination involved protecting the crowd while simultaneously defeating Kellerman, moves that ended with the instructor unconscious and Jackie standing protectively between the defeated bully and his intended victims. The AS News. Cameras captured Kellerman's defeat and community celebration. Police arrived to arrest the instructor and his associates on multiple charges. Morrison's testimony and financial evidence provided basis for broader criminal charges that would dismantle their entire operation. The public hearing reconvened with Hartwell's intimidation campaign ended and evidence of corporate corruption exposed on live television, leading to overwhelming community opposition that legally blocked the transaction. 1 month later, Jackie stood in the renovated Riverside Community Center gymnasium, watching Amy Rodriguez lead younger children through basic martial arts forms in a space that had been repaired and improved with donations flowing in after news coverage of their victory against corporate intimidation. The community center thrived, with expanded programming that emphasized traditional values, respect, discipline, and protection of others. Jackie's martial arts classes attracted students across generations, creating learning environments that strengthened community bonds while teaching practical skills for self-defense and character development. Danny Kowalski had become Jackie's assistant instructor, his experience as Kellerman's victim providing unique credibility when teaching about standing up to bullies while understanding the real costs of moral courage. His leadership among teenagers helped bridge generational gaps that had previously limited program effectiveness. Patricia Wells received promotion to regional director for a network of community centers, her successful resistance to corporate intimidation making her sought after for community organizing and institutional protection. Her experience became a model for other neighborhoods facing similar pressure from development companies. Rose Kowalski started neighborhood watch programs combining traditional community organizing with basic self-defense training, helping residents feel empowered rather than vulnerable, while creating cultures of mutual protection and support that extended beyond martial arts into daily life. Legal resolution came as Kellerman and his associates faced multiple criminal charges, while Hartwell Development Corporation underwent state investigation for their pattern of community intimidation and illegal influence campaigns. Publicity from the Riverside case encouraged other neighborhoods to come forward with similar experiences. Jackie reflected on how this experience reminded him why he'd originally fallen in love with martial arts, not for physical techniques, but for principles of protecting others and building stronger communities. His teaching work provided purpose beyond entertainment while creating lasting change. The new program attracted students citywide while maintaining focus on serving local neighborhoods first. Scholarships ensured financial need never prevented participation, and advanced students were encouraged to become teachers themselves, creating sustainable cycles of community protection. As Jackie prepared for his next adventure, he watched Danny teaching enthusiastic young students, proving that real victory lay not in defeating one bully, but in building communities strong enough to protect themselves. 3 months after Kellerman's defeat, the Riverside Community Center hosted its annual youth fair with atmosphere completely transformed from the fear and uncertainty that had marked the martial arts instructor's original demonstration. Jackie moved through crowds greeting families in his janitor's uniform, now proudly acknowledged as the center's martial arts instructor. The city council presented Jackie with a key recognizing his community service, but he deflected attention to neighbors who'd organized and fought to save their institution. His emphasis on collective action rather than individual heroism reinforced lessons he'd been teaching about true strength coming from lifting others up. Danny demonstrated advanced techniques while emphasizing protective philosophy Jackie had taught him. Amy announced intentions to study education combining teaching with martial arts instruction. Other students shared how the program had built confidence and leadership skills that extended far beyond physical training. Patricia reported the Riverside model being replicated in other neighborhoods, with communities using combinations of traditional programming, youth empowerment, and community organizing to resist various forms of external pressure and intimidation from development companies and corporate interests. As the event wound down, Jackie quietly gathered his few possessions, preparing to move on. His work at Riverside was complete, not because all problems were solved, but because the community now possessed tools and confidence to solve them independently. Rose found Jackie packing and insisted on providing care packages for his journey. Their conversation revealed reports of similar problems in other cities. Communities under pressure from developers, families threatened by organized intimidation, young people needing guidance and protection from institutional authorities. Jackie removed his janitor's uniform and hung it in the maintenance closet as symbol that anyone could become community hero when circumstances required action. His example had inspired others to step forward when neighbors needed protection from forces beyond individual resistance. As Jackie disappeared into urban landscape, Danny called after him. "What do we do if someone like Kellerman comes back?" Jackie's response carried over the scene. "You do what you've learned. Protect each other." The camera pulled back, showing the thriving community center filled with people who understood their greatest strength lay not in individual heroes, but in commitment to stand together against those who would harm children and destroy communities they'd built together. If you like the story, please watch another story on our channel and subscribe to the channel.